huge commendations to the team at the Ministry of Culture.
They seem to do it better every year. Somehow.
They do. Led by the Culture Minister, Olivia Green. And I suspect that's because she's been doing it for so long. I think she was the executive producer, I recall hearing. But I thought it was really good. I especially enjoyed that Port Royal bit.
Yes.
And the children singing. That was good. Kudos to the team. Well done. All right, so listeners, the country's two major political parties are set to have their mass rallies in the corporate area on Sunday. The governing JLP will host their rally in Halfway Tree, and speculation is rife that Prime Minister Holness will call the general election at that meeting. The opposition PNP is set to host a rally in Crossroads.
Concerns have emerged about the proximity of the two meetings and how will the police ensure there are no clashes or confrontations between the supporters, and what are the preparations being made? Well, we're now being joined by Head of the Public Safety and Traffic Enforcement Branch, that's PSTEB, ACP Dr. Gary McKenzie. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, ACP.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon to listeners and viewers.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let me start by asking if you could assist our listeners in understanding how this process works. When you are going to give approval for such a massive event, what's the process like?
Well, so the process takes in several things. One is that the persons from the various entities would actually pen what the concept is in terms of crowds, what the duration, what it involves, and so on. Once that is done, there are generally meetings to look at the logistics. The police will look at several issues to include movement of traffic, safety of persons moving from one place to another. In particular, this type of meeting, persons are likely to be moving from several areas across Jamaica, and it could be far and wide. So we look at the various routes, we discuss these with the organizers, and so on.
And so, having taken all of that into consideration, ACP, the PSTEB, the operations branch felt that this was a good idea? Because as you can imagine, members of the public are anxious and tense over the proximity, how close they'll be.
Well, you ask whether or not we consider it to be a good idea. What we look at first and foremost is the safety and security of everyone in terms of whether or not there will be anything that will affect it. We also would look at what has transpired, certainly leading up to these meetings, and based on what we have seen, it has been quite mature. We have to look at where those, you said that they are not very far from each other, but when we look at the various routes, if you look at it, which we can get into, there are several ways in which persons can actually reach to the locations, and so it is a matter for us to be prepared to manage the process from both ends.
All right, so let me give you an example of a route. I'm thinking about the laborites who are coming from West Kingston, right? So they're coming up to go into Crossroads and then to Halfway Tree. That would be the traditional route. And then there are the comrades who are coming from South St. Andrew or Southwest St. Andrew in the south. They are going to Crossroads. So how do you and your men and women ensure that the two camps don't meet? Because we're thinking of probably hundreds of buses, cars, that kind of a thing, generally coming from the same direction in some instances. How do you ensure they don't meet?
So, well, the two places you mentioned, that is pretty easy, because if you are moving from West Kingston to Halfway Tree, then Marcus Garvey Drive, Agley Park Road is an easy way. The other from South St. Andrew, Spanish Town Road, Maxfield, Lindus Road to Crossroads is an easy route.
So your men and women are going to enforce that the supporters must take particular routes to get to the meetings?
No, it's not a matter of enforce. Remember, in my initial statement, I spoke about discussions with the organizers. Remember, we are dealing with persons who they have the interest of the people of Jamaica at heart, and they want the meetings to be held.
So in other words, you've gotten assurances from the political parties that they'll abide by particular routes.
Let us not rush to assurance.
Okay, how would you say it?
ACP Mackenzie,
right. So if you allow me to say it, then
go ahead.
You will understand what I'm saying. So I'm saying it is a matter of discussing what the logistics are in terms of movement and so on to the various locations. And a part of the discussion that we will have, or we have had with the organizers, is how the various teams, how best they will be able to reach to the destinations and back. And a part of our responsibility would be to monitor those routes to ensure that people move from one area to the other safely.
Well, moving beyond that, though, ACP Mackenzie, I'm sure the P-STEP does its own security and threat assessments in terms of the proximity of the two meetings. Have you assured yourself, based on that assessment, that you foresee no trouble happening on this day?
Right. So we are not seeing any trouble. Well, I am not certain what is the gamut of what you call trouble, but if you are referring to political violence, we are not foreseeing that. And we are nevertheless prepared to treat with it. And also, what we are able to say to you is that the process of intelligence gathering and ensuring that we are prepared, it is ongoing. It is not one which is static. And what I have to say is that at this particular time, we believe that there is no threat that will prevent them from being held.
But ACP, and I suppose we have to be realistic in this matter. When the proposals were brought to you, did it not at least cause an eyebrow to be raised and at least require you to some extent to call upon one of the political parties to maybe reconsider and choose a different day?
Well, I don't know if you expect a police force such as ours, which has the capability and the capacity to ensure that the citizens of Jamaica are safe, to say that we are not able to police to meetings. I'm sure you are not saying that. What I think you should be saying is whether or not we have done the work in terms of looking at what are the risks and whether or not, based on what we have gathered, that those meetings can be held and held safely and securely. That is what I am expecting you to say.
Just about how many people are you estimating between the two rallies?
Well, based on what we have gathered and based on the history of meetings such as those, it could range between 50 or so thousand.
50,000. And you will have enough boots on the ground to sufficiently man the movements in the case of the JLP coming from all over the island, and in the case of the PNP across all the constituencies in Kingston and St. Andrew?
Certainly.
Who did you receive the request from first to host the rallies?
I am not going to get into that.
But you'd imagine the Jamaican people would want to know that, though, ACP.
No, I don't think that they are particularly concerned with that.
No, I can tell you the comments online suggest it. I just got a message asking if ACP lives in the same Jamaica that we do. So I think it is important, ACP.
Sometimes when we ask these questions, we are generally burdened by the past.
And what makes you so optimistic? Because, for example, let me just give another example. For example, we heard of a shooting incident in central Kingston just 2 days ago?
Yes.
Where the incumbent member of parliament, a sitting lawmaker, shots were fired in his direction. We've heard of that. You have
also heard, based on the discussion with the commanding officer this morning, about the fact that it was not politically motivated.
What about the vandalism across several constituencies that have heightened the tensions? I mean, you talked about intelligence. I'm assuming that's part of what you've considered.
Definitely. And of course, when it comes on to this particular season, there are a number of things that we always look for. And certainly what you have mentioned, those are possibilities. What I have to say to you, though, is that all those have been considered. And we continue to do the work around ensuring that we are on top of all the information and intelligence that can be gathered so that we can execute properly.
All right. Hold it for us, ACP. After the break, I want to talk about the other.
These are holding massed rallies in the corporate area on Sunday, that being the JLP in Halfway Tree and the People's National Party in Crossroads. We're speaking with ACP Gary McKenzie, Dr. Gary McKenzie, head of the Public Safety and Traffic Enforcement Branch. ACP, before I hand you to Ricardo to talk logistics, I want to ask you a very simple question. Does P-STEP and more by extension you have a say in the approval of these events, or is it a matter of you're handed the dossier and you must do the best you can in terms of management of the situation?
These decisions are made by the high command of the force. That's all that I will say.
So even if you had doubts or concerns, it's not a matter that you could raise them beyond the high command. It's that you've gotten a directive and simply based on your assessment, you say, we have the boots on the ground and I'm confident that we can manage the situation.
No, what I'm saying is that, and take it that I'm a part of the high command. Of course, we, as I said before, we would assess, and if we believe that there's any danger in the meetings occurring, then certainly those would be raised.
I want to ask you again, ACP, who did you get the request from first?
I am saying to you that that is not a matter that I am willing to speak about.
All right, let me ask you the question this way. How long ago were these meetings approved?
I am not willing to share that either.
Why, though, ACP?
Because I don't think that it matters. What I think that you want to discuss is whether or not the meetings will be held and whether or not the police will be able to ensure that they are held safely and securely. And that's what we are prepared to discuss.
Did you receive any of the requests in the last week?
The intricate details of how the police goes about approving and so on, that is not really a necessary issue.
I see. All right, so for Jamaicans who may have medical issues coming from the north, they need to get to KPH. What's the advice to them this afternoon?
Right, so if they are coming up from the north, and the north, based on the geography of our countries, Stony Hill, Constant Spring, and so on, they can access it quite easily through Trafalgar Road, Waterloo, Trafalgar, Old Oak Road, Tamredcam Avenue, onto Arthur Wynne Drive.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the manning, the medical manning of the rallies now, your partners, who are your partners to ensure that ambulances, in matters of fire perhaps, how do you coordinate that kind of logistics?
Right. So when we have meetings of this nature, or we have gatherings of this nature, several stakeholders are involved, and you have said some. So you certainly fire, certainly medical services will be on hand, certainly private security, and so on.
And you answered me earlier by saying, yes, you'll have enough boots on the ground. Are you prepared to say how many police officers will be across the corporate area?
What I'm prepared to say is that we have done our assessment and our logistics, and we will have adequate police personnel manning the events.
And you don't want to quantify what adequate is?
No. The adequacy of us manning the events is really our prerogative.
ACP, I can ask the question in a more roundabout way, so to speak, but are you concerned that based on the logistics and the manpower requirements for these two events, that it could cause P-STEP to lose resources in other areas?
No, it's not just P-STEP that will be a part of it. There is P-STEP, and there is the geographic divisions. And remember that the force does not have a fence. The force involves all the personnel across the country. So the entire mobilization of the force is very important with something like this. We spoke earlier about people moving from one place to another. So the mobilization will be as such, where the network of roads and so on, those will be monitored across all the areas where we know and expect people to be traveling from and to.
All right. ACP, Dr. Gary McKenzie, thank you so much for your time. And
you're most welcome.
We'll be paying attention to see the JCF execute, as you say, the force is capable of doing on Sunday.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All the best.
Man.
Yeah, man. We have a statement, listeners, from the JCF regarding that shooting incident in central Kingston. Siobhan, let's take it in turn. The High Command of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, JCF, is aware of reports concerning a shooting incident that occurred on the evening of Tuesday, August 5, 2025, in Kingston Central's Police Division. The incident reportedly involves Member of Parliament Donovan Williams and members of his campaign team.
The JCF says it views any report of gun violence with the utmost seriousness, particularly where it potentially threatens public safety or undermines the democratic process. It says we're treating this matter with the seriousness it deserves, and detectives from the Criminal Investigations Branch are actively probing the circumstances surrounding the incident.
The JCF says it maintains a zero-tolerance approach to violence in all its forms, including any act that may be politically motivated. It says as the nation proceeds through what has thus far been a peaceful election campaign, the JCF urges all Jamaicans to refrain from any form of political violence and to play their part in ensuring that the elections remain free, fair, and free from fear.
The JCF says as this investigation progresses, it assures the public that it will be conducted in a thorough, impartial, and professional manner. It's urging all individuals with relevant information to come forward and support the process of justice. The statement concludes that the safety and security of all Jamaicans remains the JCF's highest priority, and it will continue to act decisively to ensure that those who seek to disrupt peace and order are held accountable under the law.
So, essentially a statement of reassurance that it's taking the matter seriously. No information as to whether there are any suspects or any kind of leads being followed, but that's what the JCF has to say about it. I understand the Prime Minister is in central Kingston.
Yes.
Today.
Yes, as a sign of solidarity with Donovan Williams, and just to make it clear to people that none of our politicians will be cowed by any acts of violence.
You know, I was looking at the images, and I think Robin was showing me a video. It's so interesting because 4 or 5 years ago, you wouldn't expect to see so much green in a place like Central Kingston. And I can't wait for the results of election night because, I mean, Cliff has been saying it, that there may be a realigning of the political landscape. And I do want to see whether those quote unquote traditional seats that created upsets in 2020 will go back to their so-called.
I quipped just a few minutes ago that it's a stronghold no more, it seems, because to see that many people in green shirts just openly traversing throughout the constituency was quite a shock to me.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Well, you hear it there. The police say that they are prepared and that they can manage what is expected on Sunday. Did he say he expects about 50,000?
Yes, 50,000.
About 50,000 supporters of the JLP and PNP combined to be between Crossroads and Halfway Tree. You can go on our website. We did post the full advisories. Robian gave you a report at the top of the 5 o'clock bulletin, but it's actually very detailed, so you know exactly where you can and cannot go, where you can park, where you can't park. And if you have to do business in that area, the police are saying you need to wrap it up by 12 noon, because for about 12 hours, those busy intersections will be off limits.
Tell me, though, Rukad, to your recollection, has there been any similar circumstance in the past where two political events of this significance held on the same day in such close proximity, essentially walking distance?
I can't recall. I recall there was an incident in Portland. I think it was in the by-election, Damien Crawford against Anne-Marie Vaz, where they were pretty close, but obviously that was not on the scale that we expect to see on Sunday.
And I don't believe it was on the same day either.
Yeah, that's all I can remember, but I don't remember this happening. Which is why it would have been so important to hear who put in the request first. But being as astute as he is, ACP Mackenzie declined in a politically charged environment. Because obviously, I think, I'm just going to say it, the person who put in the request
should be the one to be allowed.
The last person who put in the request should have been denied, I think. I think the first person should have gotten first dibs, and the other person could have probably chosen to go to Montego Bay, or in the case of the PNP, which obviously wants to have Kingston and St. Andrews rally in Kingston and St. Andrew, then perhaps another location or another date.
And I would agree with you on that. But I mean, at this point, we have to put faith in the institutions as they stand. We talked of the improvements in the police force, and the JCF says they can handle the matter. So I will put faith in the police that they believe that they can handle the matter, so that they will handle the matter as appropriately as they can.
What I'm most concerned about is not so much the going, is the leaving.
Yes, because there will be tension.
Yeah, after everybody's charged and active election call.
After the liquor has been flowing and the weed has been smoked.
Yeah, that's what I'm most concerned about. But as he says, they'll have the boots on the ground on the routes. So let us hope and let us pray that it's peaceful and incident-free, and everybody can express their political preference without incident.
And that is what that's all we can hope for. We have had to this date, for the last 10, 15 years or so, essentially violence-free elections. We hope that we keep that record going forward.
It's 6 o'clock. Time for the headlines.